The story revolves around a young couple forced to flee their missionary post in Kalahari village when an extremist militant group threatens their lives. They board the next available plane alongside a group of tourists. However, their journey takes a horrifying turn when their plane crashes amid an animal reserve, inhabited by man-eaters. Now stranded in the wild, they must fight for survival from the ferocious predators. Hey guys, welcome back to IM Movies. Today we'll be looking at the 2024 American action thriller movie titled Prey. But before we jump into the details, be aware there are spoilers. Now let's get right into it. The movie begins with Andrew, who is overwhelmed by his failure to save a young boy's life despite his earnest efforts. Amid his despair, Wanda rushes in to alert him about the approaching militants, urging him to leave. Andrew quickly drives to where his wife Sue is holding a Sunday school session with the village kids to inform her. He shares that a plane is arriving and they need to hurry to catch it. On their way to the airport, Sue asks if they'll come back. Andrew, still angry over the boy's death, laments that he could have saved the boy's life if they hadn't stolen his medical supplies or even delivered the ones they ordered many weeks ago. He is exasperated over the whole experience and concludes that their missionary venture in Africa isn't working as he had hoped. At the airport, Thabo, the tourist's aide, informs them that the plane has arrived. One of the tourists, named Kyle, introduces himself to the pilot, Grun, stating that his father had chartered the plane. Grun instructs him to get on board and continues to the airport office. The officer on duty stamps a pass for him, despite it not being valid. Sue and Andrew arrive at the airport with the help of Wanda. Sue expresses gratitude for his assistance, assuring him they'll return once the village is safe. Meanwhile, Andrew negotiates with Grun, who demands 10,000 rand per head. Andrew finds the price exorbitant and Grun suggests he wait for next week's flight if his price doesn't suit him. Andrew reluctantly agrees as they must leave the village urgently. While boarding, Grun instructs them to leave their luggage behind. Andrew asks Grun whether he's the same pilot who's supposed to deliver medical supplies to the village. Grun assures him they'll be delivered on the next run. Andrew and Sue hand their luggage to Wanda before boarding the rickety plane with their backpacks. As the plane takes off, they notice its seatbelts are destroyed, except for the one where Sue is seated. During the flight, Thabo engages Sue in a casual conversation until the plane starts jerking, making them nervous. Thabo alerts Grun about the plane being overloaded, but Grun brushes it off, insisting he knows what he's doing. The shaking intensifies, prompting Andrew to stand up and inquire about the situation. But Grun orders them to remain seated. Everyone becomes anxious and scared as the shaking worsens. Suddenly, the plane loses altitude and crashes violently. After the crash, Andrew quickly gets up and searches for his wife. He finds her trapped in a section of the plane and calls out to Thabo for help. Together, they try to free her, but a piece of metal tears her skin during the process. Andrew bandages her wound and stays by her side. Sadly, Max's girlfriend Chrissy didn't survive the crash, leading Max to bury her in the desert. Shortly after, Thabo confronts Grun, questioning the condition of the plane and its maintenance. Grun reacts defensively, threatening Thabo to stay out of his business. Andrew steps in and shuns Grun for his childish behavior. Later, Thabo asks Grun how long they were in the air and the river they flew over. Grun reveals they were airborne for 30 minutes, and the river is called Nala River. They come to a shocking realization about where they've crash-landed. Grun and the other survivors approach Andrew, who is seated by his wife's side, to inform him that they have crashed in the Nala Animal Reserve, a habitat for wild animals. He explains that there's a village nearby where they can seek help. Grun reassures them that the animals are more active at sunset, so they need to move quickly. He advises them to gather as much water and food as possible for the journey. Sue tells Andrew she can't move due to severe pain from the crash and her wound, urging him to go without her. Despite his concerns and the dangers, she insists she'll be fine. Grun announces it's time to leave, but Andrew decides to stay with his wife, asking Grun to send help once they reach the village. Grun scoffs at their reliance on faith over common sense, emphasizing the danger of staying, knowing they're surrounded by lions. Despite Grun's warnings, Andrew remains firm in his decision, adding that he doesn't expect Grun to understand. Thabo, genuinely concerned, offers to help Andrew carry Sue, but she reassures him they will manage. Spotting a gun in Grun's hands, Thabo suggests leaving it with them for protection, but Grun refuses, unwilling to risk his life for what he sees as a foolish decision. Thabo, Kyle, Max, and Grun set out towards the east, leaving Andrew and Sue behind. After walking for miles, they pause to rest. Max becomes frantic, claiming the village is to the west, but Grun dismisses his concerns, insisting he knows the way. Back at the crash site, Andrew searches through the luggage compartment and discovers luggage filled with rhino horns. However, the journey eastward has become long and exhausting, leading Tyler to collapse in the desert. Grun reassures them they're almost there and encourages them to push on for a few more minutes. Kyle, feeling parched, requests water, and Grun hands over his water bottle, much to Thabo's surprise. Unprovokedly, Grun explains that he's not generous but only offers his water because there's a river nearby. He urges them to get up so they'll continue their journey. Back at the crash site, Andrew tends to his wife while discussing their future. He suggests they adopt a child once they're home, bringing a glimmer of hope to Sue's face. He reassures her they'll make it out, and they share a moment of prayer. Meanwhile, Grun and the others reach a peak in the desert, realizing they've been heading the wrong way. Max becomes paranoid and grabs Grun's gun and points it at him. He accuses him of putting them in this situation in the first place, insisting they should have gone west. Grun, in a cold tone, expresses that they made a wrong turn, maintaining that the village is on the east side and urging them to follow him if they want to stay alive. Despite their exhaustion, Thabo and Kyle muster the strength to continue, while Max ventures off to a different part on his own. After another long and exhausting journey in the desert, the trio finds themselves back at the crash site. Upon arrival, Thabo succumbs to heat exhaustion and motion sickness, vomiting immediately. Grun notices bloodstains and scratches where Sue had lain before they departed, evidence of the lion's attack. Moving cautiously around the plain, Andrew suddenly lunges at Grun, accusing him of his wife's death and attempting to strangle him. It is then revealed that his wife has eaten by lions that night. Furious and frustrated, Andrew kneels by Sue's makeshift grave, weeping bitterly. Thabo joins him, offering sympathy and reassurance. Andrew blames himself for her death, but Thabo consoles him, emphasizing that he did his best. Later, Grun confides in Thabo about the lions returning, expressing their slim chances of survival. He mentions the plane's cockpit locks and that 3 people could squeeze in, but they're 4 in number. They decide to discuss the matter with Andrew. Approaching Andrew, who appears dazed, he questions Grun about his involvement in smuggling rhino horns. Andrew reflects on his failure to deliver medical supplies to save lives and instead chooses to smuggle goods for his selfish gain. Andrew asserts angrily that the plane crashed due to the heavy load, but Grun denies any connection and defensively argues that the crash was a mere mishap, blaming Andrew for his wife's death for not coming with them earlier. Andrew defends his decision, insisting he stayed behind to protect his wife, a concept Grun cannot relate to. Later that evening, they decide by flipping a coin who will stay outside, with the lot falling on Kyle. Kyle refuses, attempting to bribe Thabo with $1 million to take his place, prompting a mocking laugh from Thabo. As night falls, Grun gathers firewood and lights a fire on the section of the plain, where Kyle is seated to deter the lions. He instructs Kyle to not let the fire go out. Meanwhile, Max is lost and terrified in the desert. Upon hearing a lion's growl, he panics and fires his gun rapidly, startling the others. Later in the night, Grun steps outside to ease himself, inadvertently allowing a snake to slither into the cockpit. He checks on Kyle, who's already in deep sleep, and notices the fire dying out. He wakes him up, urging him to stay awake, and then returns to the cockpit. Things get intense when Kyle's fire goes out that night, and he is attacked by the lions. His scream startled the others, leaving them unsettled. Andrew, who's more disturbed by the screams, suggests going out to help him, but Grun opposes the idea. Unable to bear the screams, Andrew attempts to go help him, and upon opening the door, a lion lunges at him, throwing him off balance. Grun and Thabo hastily shut the door, barricading it with a pole as the lion relentlessly claws and thuds against it. Amidst the chaos, Thabo is bitten by a snake, causing him to scream in pain. Grun swiftly knocks off the snake and thumps it to death, while Andrew extracts the snake's venom. The next morning, Andrew surveys the aftermath of the previous night's horror, which leaves him more devastated. He staggers towards a barren tree nearby and sits under it, dazed and numb. Grun assists Thabo out of the cockpit, improvising a crutch to aid his mobility. He walks up to Andrew and tells him it's time to leave. Andrew responds that he's tired and lacks the motivation to keep fighting. Grun and Thabo set out again to find the village. After walking a few miles, Grun spots a vehicle in the distance. He screams with excitement, alerting Andrew. Andrew's face lights up with joy upon seeing the car approaching, but his joy soon fades when he realizes it's the militants. As soon as they arrive, one of the militants hits Andrew with the head of his gun. Thabo and Gran intervene, with Thabo pleading for them to stop, explaining their predicament. The militant silences him with a blow from the gun. They discover the rhino horns and question Andrew about the buyer, but he remains silent. He threatens to shoot Andrew, who remains calm, and then Gran steps in, claiming responsibility for smuggling the horns. The militant then threatens to kill Grun, but Thabo begs them not to. He prompts them to take the horns and let them go their way, insisting they're not terrorists. Without warning, one of the militants shoots Thabo in the head. 2 militants hold Andrew and Grun hostage, while one drives back to get a truck. One of the militants taunts Andrew and Grun, threatening to shoot them if they try anything. Hours later, Andrew collapses from exhaustion, and Grun, seeing the militants asleep, tries to overpower them. The militant wakes up and shoots at Grun. Fortunately, there's no bullet in the gun. They engage in a struggle, waking his partner. He tries to shoot Grun but accidentally shoots his cohort. Andrew steps in and diverts the gun's direction. In the scuffle, he inadvertently turns the gun towards the militant, killing him. He immediately regrets the turn of events and tries to resuscitate him, but he is already dead. Afterward, Grun finally takes responsibility and apologizes to Andrew for the plane crash and the deaths of the other passengers. Feeling the need to make amends, he pleads with Andrew to give him a chance to help him get out of that jungle alive. Grun supports Andrew as the wound on his leg worsens, making it nearly impossible for him to walk. Finally, they reach the rock that leads to the village, which Grun has been trying to locate. Despite Andrew's belief that he can't climb, Grun refuses to leave him behind. He helps Andrew up the rock, but he falls back down. At that moment, Grun sees lions approaching, trailing Andrew's blood. He helps Andrew climb up and hides behind the rock, watching the lions. He sighs with relief when he sees the lions walking away. But when a wind blows past Grun and Andrew and it reaches the lion's nose, they stop since the smell of blood is strong and it returned to the rocks. Grun spots a scorpion climbing his body and remains calm. When it crawls over to Andrew's body, Grun whispers to him to remain still. He knocks the scorpion off Andrew's body, causing a piece of rock to fall and alerting the hovering lion. Grun smears Andrew's blood on his body and shares that he felt so good helping him. He encourages Andrew to keep fighting for survival, against all odds, and keep his wife's dreams alive. With grit, Grun dashes down the rock, distracting the lion and sacrificing himself to save Andrew. With the last ounce of his strength, Andrew continues the journey, staggering along his path. Soon he faces a pair of hyenas and questions God if this is the end of the road for him. As the hyenas lunge towards him, Andrew grabs a stick to defend himself. Suddenly, lightning strikes, causing the hyenas to scamper away in fear, and then it starts to rain. Andrew sprawls gratefully on the ground and opens his mouth to catch the refreshing rainwater, after which he falls asleep. At sunrise, when Andrew opens his eyes, Wanda and a villager found him, and they take him home. And this is where our story ends. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.